Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at GCNlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor at USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to USA Prepares. This is Cathy. I'm filling in for Vince today. I want to thank Jason for engineering the program. Sharon will be joining me today, and we are going to be talking about seeds for the garden, what we plant, dehydrating. And we are also going to be talking about some of the massive inflation that we have seen and some of the increases that we've seen with food prices and just standard household good prices, things like lumber and that type of thing. Before we get started, though, I would like to mention that Vince had a past life discussion with Dr. Shealy, and he thoroughly enjoyed it. And he will be talking about it in more depth on Monday. And I would like to encourage anyone that's in the area where Dr. Shealy has his office to consider attending one of these sessions. It seems like they're just very beneficial. So that I'd like to encourage people to do that. Also, Vince is graciously allowing Sharon and myself to teach this class, which we both appreciate. And it's a tall order to follow Vince. So I just wanted to thank Vince for that opportunity, and Vince will be here tomorrow. So I would like to welcome Sharon.
Well, good morning.
Good morning, Sharon.
Where would you like to begin on this?
Well, I would like to mention, if we can talk a few minutes about what we are seeing in the stores and the inflation and some of the things that we should get now and some of the things that might be hard to obtain. And then after that, we can talk about our garden and starting seeds, because in a lot of areas, especially in the zone 5s and that type of area, everybody's getting their gardens going. So I think maybe we can talk about our successes and our failures. So can I ask you what you have seen with the inflation and what you're noticing in the stores? And are you having trouble ordering things or getting things?
You know, I was just looking at our ads that came out on Wednesday. So I noticed that butter is now from $2, it's at $2.50 on sale. Okay, we're not talking a high-end brand, just regular butter. And I noticed that the 2-pound blocks of cheese, I used to always still get them for $3.99, sometimes even $3.69. They're on for either $4.99 or $5.99, so that's $1 or $2 more. We used to always get French bread for 99 cents, and it's on sale now for $1.50, so that's 50% increase. Sour cream wasn't huge. I'm just talking the Kroger brand. It used to always be on for $1. It's $1.25 now, but that's 25% increase. And I noticed that Dawn dish soap, I used to be able to get it for $1.99 on sale, and it's up to $2.49. And I know when I went to get bacon at Costco last time, it was at least $1.50 to $2 more per 4-pack. Okay. And then corn was what really surprised me. We used to get, way back $5 for $1, but then $4 for $1. Last year was $3 for $1. And this year, they're either at the store, the cheapest was 59 cents for a single ear of corn. So if you had a family of just 5, say 3 kids, you would pay $2 and 70 cents or something like that, a little over $2.50 anyway, just for your vegetable, for your meal. So that is just a quick looking. I've noticed so many other prices in the store, but I didn't write them down. So inflation is definitely here, and according to another blog video thing I was listening to, he was saying that Bank of America said that we will be having inflation, and that jumped over to a couple other companies. So actually out in the main media, they're telling you that inflation is coming. And I can see it quite clearly, and I know you and I have discussed that too. We both can. So those are just a few ideas that I noticed, even this morning when I was looking at the ads.
Well, and I've noticed too, it's not just your food, it's the metals and the wood and components for appliances. That people are having trouble building their homes and getting appliances. One of the statistics that I read, it was a 2,000 square foot home, and if you were going to have a new build, just for the wood, the increase for the wood was $36,000. Just for the wood, because it's gone up that much.
Oh, I believe it. They were saying at least it's double or triple what you would think before. It's gone up astronomically. We had to pick up just some 2x4s, and they had jumped so much it was ridiculous. So, yeah, kind of scary that way.
Well, and, gas goes up. So if gas goes up, then everything transported gets an increase. Everybody that has to farm or has to supply fuel to grow the crops or to package them or get them to the store or whatever, all that's going to go up. But I think there's some things I've noticed that have stayed the same, and they haven't gone up too much, or they fluctuate. But I think overall, I've noticed at least a 25% increase on a lot of the groceries and a lot more. One of the things that I noticed was meat has gone up quite a bit, and supplements. And the supplements, some of them have really raised. I know a couple months ago I went to the health food store that I get certain ones for, and almost everything took a 25% jump. It was just, I go, wow, this seems higher. She goes, yeah. She goes, we're getting them in, and they're having trouble getting each herb or supplement. So it's causing more increase because they're just having trouble obtaining them. But the other thing I've noticed was that the packages are smaller. It's really rare to find like a 1 pound bag of chips anymore, or a 1 pound box of crackers. Some of them are ridiculous. They're 3 to 4 ounces, but the box looks the same. So they want $2 for that box of crackers or the pretzels or whatever. And now, like I said, some of them, if you watch your sales, you can get them, but the packages are smaller. I just think if you look at your packaged goods, I know flour's gone up, sugar's gone up. I think I saw Pillsbury flour, a 5 pound bag. I saw it the other day. It was like $2.50 or $2.60 for a 5 pound bag. And I think a couple years ago, you could probably get it right around between $1 and $1.30.
Yeah, they used to go on sale for 99 cents. The 5 pound bags used to go on sale for 99 cents. Because I used to buy them that way when it was less expensive. Yeah, they call it shrink inflation. I was just hearing that Costco, even with their big paper towels, have, if there were, I don't remember the number, but say there's 125 squares, they've gone down to like 118 or something less, and the baby wipes that they used to buy in the packages there have less in them too. So that's kind of the way they're giving you inflation, but trying to make it not so you notice it. And like you, I rarely find anything that's now 16 ounces anymore. It's like 14.5, something like that. Yeah.
But the jar is the same, or the box is the same.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the other thing that's going up, and if you can buy them now, it's probably a great idea, is plastic and paper are both going up. Even the plastic shoe boxes that I use, like for storage, to get the decent ones, I thought that they used to be around $1. Now they're like $2 and $2.49. Now you can get the real cheap ones, like at the dollar store. But if you want something sturdy that you need to stack, you're going to pay a little more money for those now.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's definitely there, and I feel like pretty soon people will really notice it. But if you're averaging about 25% increase, which I would agree with you, because some is even more, so you average it out. Well, if you were paying $100, you're now paying $125. So instead of, say, $400 at the end of the month, which most people pay more than that, but I'm just rounding off, then you'd be paying $500. So there goes $100 that you hadn't counted on. And I believe that most people pay way more than that for groceries. So I am totally into getting whatever I can when it's on sale or good deals, or as you and I both like to look for the markdowns, because a lot of this stuff it'll store a long time. They're just moving it. A lot of times they mark them down because right now, like you said, they're reducing the size of the package, and it's not extremely noticeable unless you set a new package next to the old package. But when you're putting them on shelves, it will show up. So they get rid of all the older, larger packaging, and they put in this smaller one that hopefully you won't pay attention that you got less for your money. And so then they mark those down, and you get a very good deal a lot of times if you know your prices. So I know we've discussed offline some of our fantastic deals we've gotten, but the goods are still very good for maybe a couple years even. It's just that the packaging changed, and so they mark them down. So that's a good way to find good stuff, by the way.
Well, one of the deals that they still have, Sam's still has the big 12-pound bags of the Pinto Beans, and they're 68 cents a pound. And that's a good deal. And so those will store for a couple years, and even if you put them in like some type of a container, like a plastic bucket with the lid or something, and maybe put bay leaves in there to keep any kind of bugs from getting in there. Typically, beans keep for a long time, but I know they have them there. I'm finding gaps though. Like I went down the aisle where they had like the pickles and they had the condiments, and it was probably 20% of what I normally see there was gone. And there were some areas where it was just open. They were short on like olives, and I know it's a regional thing sometime, but I just think that if they're having trouble getting certain things, they just don't have them in the store. I also noticed too that the canning lids are not available yet. If I go to the store, I kind of peek to see. I am seeing canning jars. So if you get canning jars, you get the lids and the bands with them. So it's okay. Like if you wanted to get like a dozen pints and it cost you like $9.99, well, you're going to get the lids and the bands with it. So you're not paying that much more. You're maybe paying $5 more, but you get the jars. So if you can't find the lids and you really want your canning jars, just go ahead and buy them. But I'm not sure whether they're going to be in. Maybe they'll get them in by the time that canning season really kicks up.
Yeah, I would also suggest you be kind of careful if you're buying extra canning lids that you don't get some cheap Chinese-type canning lids. There's some real off-brands, and you have to be careful. I've been following some different canning, I guess, blogs or whatever you call them, and they were talking about how they ordered some, and that the metal was extremely thin, and the rubber was even thinner. So I do tend to aim for the bulker. I've gotten a thing called Orchard something. They were really good, but I would kind of, if nothing else, you kind of have to know what canning jars look like. But you probably could open up a canning, like a bulker one, and then compare it with the off-brand and see if it looks as good as the, thicker rubber and thicker metal. Otherwise, I would kind of stick with the bulker myself, just as a thought.
Okay, we'll pick this up on our other side of the break with Sharon. Welcome back to our class. This is Cathy and Sharon, and we're going to talk about gardening now. I think that I first want to encourage everyone to just try it. If you put seeds in and they don't make it, well, then you learn and you find out. You learn from your failures and your successes. If you put plants in and that you don't get 100% of success, you still can learn. And I think it's an enjoyable activity. It is work. But even if you can only do some container pots or raised beds, or maybe you just start real small and then you can increase your garden a little bit. But I want to talk about what we grow and some of our ideas of how we grow it, our successes and our failures. And I would also like to say, grow what you like. If you love cucumbers, if you love tomatoes or peppers, grow what you like. And if you can't get seeds, let's say you go to a garden center and you're only going to maybe do, let's say you're not going to do a ton of peppers, but you just want a couple plants, then just buy the variety that you like if you can find it at the garden center and try that. But if you want to do lettuce, then buy the package of seeds because those are so much easier to sow. So I just would encourage everyone to try it and to just read and to learn. But I want to ask Sharon first. Sharon, what would you like to go into as far as gardening? Like, what are your favorite plants, the ones you're most successful with?
Okay. I'm going to mention just a couple things too before I forget them. If you want to order trees, check out Pine Tree, just like a pine tree. It's a seed company, and they're considerably less than everybody else, and they don't knowingly sell any GMO seeds. So they're a really good source, and they're online. You can find them. And then if you want to do any kind of container gardening, you can get those old kiddie pools, and you can put dirt in them, and you can grow in that. You just have to pop some holes in the bottom, and so you have some drainage. And then when I grow, I tend to lean towards the square foot gardening idea. I don't actually make a grid, but I envision it in my mind because we have really long raised beds because we're in the hills. We're in the Rocky Mountains, and that's what you have, rocks. So we did raised beds, and so if you do square foot gardening and companion gardening, you can grow 2-3 things together, and you will get a lot more for your space. So if you don't have a lot of space, you can do that. We've done that for a long time because we have worked with raised beds mostly because of where we've been living, and so you can get a lot more in the same amount of space. I grow all kinds of stuff. I hadn't even realized how much I grew until I started making a few notes on here. But I think if I was growing anything in it, I just like to grow tomatoes. Okay. I really do. We have a greenhouse because we can get frost at our elevation. But when you have tomatoes, you can just can them. You can dice them. I make lots of salsa. Last year I made some tomato paste out of it. I've made some ketchup before. You can make tomato sauce, barbecue sauce, spaghetti sauce. I mean, I guess I cook with a lot of tomatoes, and we've been very successful at growing our tomatoes. So they're just like loaded with those beautiful red tomatoes, and I just love to grow them. So every year I start them from seed, and every year I plant way too many, as my husband says, but I figure out a way to put them to use. Plus, they're very easy to give to people. If you end up with too many, they're happy to get organically grown, homegrown tomatoes. So I grow them a lot. I usually grow some peppers because that goes along with my salsa. And I also have this recipe for bread and butter jalapeno peppers. And so I give away a lot of that to people who like spicy things, and my sons love them. And yeah, so I grow that. But otherwise, we grow like the lettuces and kale and chard and spinach. And you can dry all those greens, and you can use them for like in smoothies. And it's really nice to have a dehydrator, but actually when I'm drying a lot of greens, I just put them on a clean window screen in one of my cars that we're not using. Okay, like we have a plow truck. I don't use a plow truck in summer. So I can put them inside on that, and I dry them that way, and you can do great big batches that way. And I take like dried spinach in particular and throw it into my seasoned sauces when I'm cooking, like spaghetti sauce, and you can't even taste it. But it kind of slides in more nutrition, and I think I hear the music. You like?
Yep, you do. Yeah. We're going into a break, and when we get back, we'll continue.
Okay.
Welcome back. Sharon, can I ask you about your tomatoes? What are some tips that you could give people if they have, they're planting them? Like, how do you fertilize? How far apart do you put them? Can you tell me how you...
I've always put like about, I put about a tablespoon of Epsom salts in the bottom because it's supposed to help them. And I have sprinkled eggshells along because they need calcium. But last year I watched Roots and Refuge on YouTube, and she put an egg at the bottom of her tomato plants before she planted them because she had read that it works. And I tried it. I can't honestly tell you if they were better or not because it was kind of really busy summer, but it didn't hurt it. And if you were to get eggs on sale, it wouldn't hurt to crack an egg and put it at the bottom. but give your tomato plant a lot of nutrition. So it's an interesting thought. You're supposed to plant them a good foot apart. I kind of tend to crowd them a little bit closer. My friend keeps telling me you'll get more tomatoes if you spread them apart, and I think you're probably correct about that. But I just get a ton of tomatoes anyway. They are in a greenhouse, so that's kind of a subjective thing. I like to prune off the little sucker plants. You can go online and see what sucker stems are and branches. I like to go through there and cut a lot of them off. I do it more some years than others, depending on how much time I have. But I do believe that makes a little healthier plant, and it allows it to put more energy into the tomatoes if you can prune them back. But in all honesty, I've done some years where I never did, and I still got a lot of tomatoes. I just think you get a little better tomatoes, bigger ones, if you do that. So it does not take very long to do that, by the way, depending on how many tomatoes you grow. But yeah, we've had really good success with them. It's kind of funny. People say they're hard to grow, and for us, they haven't been. Our potatoes have been more of a challenge in our area, and I'm not really sure. We've never been what I would consider successful at growing a lot of potatoes. They seem to take a fair amount of space to get enough to, to be real productive. But we keep trying every year. I think part of it is due to our very dense soil, because I do grow those directly in the ground. So I've been putting in a lot of compost and kind of stuff. I have some super aged sawdust, and I've been trying to have that tilled in and then put compost and see if we can't figure out how to grow potatoes, because potatoes are super nutritious and they store well and they would fill you. And we're leaning towards what are more nutritious foods and what are more garden foods that have substance, like potatoes will fill you, or dried beans, if you make a big pot of them, they'll fill you, some grains. And we've never really played a whole lot, grown a whole lot of that. But where the economy is going, I think if you can learn to garden anything in your area so that you can learn what your soil and your climate is like, and then start, if you have a garden already, maybe expand and see what you could grow that would supplement your diet more. Like I've always just bought pinto beans, but I'm actually going to see if I can grow some out here this year. And because if you couldn't get them in the store or they get to be so expensive, it would really pay for you to be able to grow them yourself, because they're not hard to harvest. Those things aren't. So that's pretty much all I know with the tomatoes. I just like to grow them. And they tell you should water them from the bottom, and I'm going to tell you it's probably a good idea, but we've always watered ours from the top. And in our climate, it's been fine. So that's just our experience.
Well, and you have, to me, especially if it gets real hot, you should try to water them regularly. I've made a mistake a couple years where I got busy and I said, they look like they don't need water, but then I lost the blossoms because they just didn't have enough water. So I knew that I didn't water them enough. And I did something a couple of years ago. We had a stretch of probably a week where we had like mid-90s, almost to 100. And I read about it, and what they did was I have like a split rail fence on part of my garden. So I took tarps or sheets and I attached them to that fence, and I just made a shade cloth for them. And I just put it up around the hottest part of the day, starting around like 11, and I left it up till about 4, and then I would flip it back. And I did that all week, because when I didn't do that the year before, they suffered. It was even tomatoes that love heat. It was just a really, really hot spell, and it was so dry that it just sort of protected them from getting scorched, and the blossoms didn't drop off. So that's a suggestion. And then again, there's different ways to stake them. When you if you're going to tie them up to a stake, now a lot of times what I do is I have some really big tomato cages. I mean, they're tall. They've got like 5 rungs, but they're real thick. You can't bend them like you can the cheaper ones in the store. Well, I pound them in, or I push them in the ground, and then I'll take like a heavy duty stake or even a piece of conduit, and I'll tie that on there, because if sometimes those tomatoes get real heavy, they can even tip that cage over. But I'll take shoelaces, and I very, very gently tie them. You don't want to tie them real tight. You want to let the stem expand. Or you can use twine as long as you don't tie them real tight. But you could even take pieces of like bed sheets and just cut them in strips. But I save old shoelaces, and then I just tie them in a loose knot. And then if I have to move up the where I tied it, like if the tomato's growing bigger, all I do is untie it and just move it up. So I don't have to keep going back and getting the twine and cutting it. So it's just something, if you have a lot of old shoelaces, I have a whole bag of them now because I've saved them for years, but they last from season to season. They really don't deteriorate. So that's a couple suggestions that I did with my tomatoes too. And I did like you. I did the eggshells and the Epsom salt. And I have a tomato fertilizer, a tomato and vegetable fertilizer, but I try to mulch around them and keep the weeds out if you can. Once they get going, I leave it open around the bottom so that you can get water there. But I'll take chopped up leaves or grass clippings and try to put them in between the rows and the tomatoes, and that helps to keep the weeds down.
Yeah, there are two types of tomatoes, too, the determinate and indeterminate. So I tend to grow most determinate, which means they only grow a certain height. But the indeterminate will grow forever. And last year I put a couple in inadvertently because I grow more than one kind normally. And it was really funny. It dropped down and it rooted and it kept growing down our bed. We have a large greenhouse that we grow in, and that was kind of humorous. I forgot. Yeah, I use tomato cages and tie them up because I don't use the indeterminate, or you need really big ones. And I do try to get a lot of the branches that are low off. They don't get too damp and moldy. You know, some places have a harder trouble with mold than we do. So far, we're way up north, so we're not going to get the super heat down south. So I would say you definitely want to keep it more open where you have a more humid environment than us. And I love the idea of a shade cloth. We don't usually tend to get that extreme heat, and my husband runs fans in our greenhouse to keep airflow going. But I know shade cloth can be extremely important, especially in the southern states. So that is a great idea. And I like your shoelace idea. I've heard of twist ties and all kinds of stuff, but like you said, it would be easy to take that off and reuse it. So I actually like that idea. It's great. I hadn't heard of it. Yeah, there's a lot of little tricks. Well, I would also suggest that if you have a good garden center, if you can get somebody who really knows what you're talking about, find out what kind of tomatoes grow best in your area or how long of a season you have. Like we have a relatively short growing season here. So I tend to grow things that do not have a long growing period that you can easily do down south, but I can't. I just end up with green tomatoes otherwise.
Well, the other thing I wanted to mention is if you're going to go pick out, let's say you're just going to go to the garden center and pick out plants, for the most part, people want to get the tall, leggy ones. I recommend personally that you get the shorter, stockier, thicker ones. They, to me, they're healthier, and you want to look for the dark green. If they start looking pale, yellowy color, or even a light green, just see if you can find the shorter, thicker stem. And when I plant my tomato, if I get them from the garden center, I take them out of the pot, very gently loosen up the roots. But if it's, let's say it's 8 inches tall or 6 inches tall, I'll take the very bottom of leaves off, and then I plant that a little deeper because I believe it makes the tomato stronger. Because it will root from that stem. So depending on the weather, sometimes it gets away from you because right now where we're in Ohio, I have chances of frost for the next 4 or 5 days. It's going to get down in the mid-30s. So, your cool weather plants are going to be okay. But everything that you have gotten, let's say you went to the garden center, you're going to have to keep that in the house or in a warm place until you can get it in the ground. So you might have to have things get a little leggy, but if you can pick them out, try to get the shorter, stockier plants and peppers and tomatoes and beans and that kinds of things if you can pick them out.
Yeah, I would agree. I've actually, I sometimes have kind of leggy tomato plants because I have grown them in my window. This year I actually have some lights on them, but they sometimes are kind of stocky, but you can just leave 3 inches above the ground and plant the rest below. And if you can't go all the way down deep, you can actually lay it at a kind of a gentle 45-degree angle, and it will root, and it makes really strong plants that way. So, but you do want to take off the leaves before you stick them in the ground. You just pinch off the little leaves, and then you lay them down in there and cover them with dirt real well. And yeah, I've done that lots of times. And because, like I said, a lot of times my tomatoes, I grow them from seeds myself. And at this time of year, probably you would just want to go and get your tomatoes at the greenhouses, if you can, I would say. But I started mine, about 6 weeks ago, something like that, in the house. So, but, it's good. A lot of the stuff you can plant in the ground, like when you start jumping into your lettuces and kale and chard and all that, you can just plant them straight in the ground. Peppers take quite a while to germinate and get big enough, so you probably would want to buy your peppers at the greenhouse too, if you can get them for a reasonable price. And a lot of times I've heard that the farmers markets have really good deals on that, so you might check into that too. Ours is just so far away, and the time factor when they have it, it's just not worth me driving 30 miles to go to a farmer's market. It's just not. So, but, it's definitely a viable place. A lot of people like to start their little plants at home and take them there and sell them. And if you know your prices, you might get some really good deals. I like to grow like green beans, and we've played around corn. We have raised beds. So last year I grew zucchini underneath the corn, and this year I'm looking at growing either squash or zucchini under the corn. You can grow corn, beans, and squash all in the same area. They called them the Three Sisters, and it still works really well. So I'm always trying to figure out how much I can grow in each area and still sustain them. You don't want to overcrowd to where they don't get enough nutrition. But we top dress, or we're still tilling in quite a bit of compost because we have such heavy clay soil. So we're trying to get it more loamy. But we can grow all those three things together. Corn takes quite a bit of space, so it's nice if you can grow like beans next to them and squash so you don't waste all that space. I don't know if you've tried doing that or not.
No, I haven't done that, but we can pick up the topic when we get back, Sharon. We're going into a break. We'll be right back.
Okay.
Welcome back to our class. This is Cathy with Sharon. I'd like to mention a couple things just so I don't forget. One of the things I would encourage you to save, because it does help to help your soil if you need to do it. Like what I did in the fall was I don't have a lot of leaves on my property, but I do have family members that do, and I have areas where I know that the people chop up their leaves with their mowers, and they either bag them or they put them by the side of the road. And so I've been known to take my drawstring garbage bags with me, and on a nice day in the fall, I'll stop and I'll fill all those bags as much as I can, and I'll haul them home, or some of my friends will bring them over like in truckloads if they see the bags or they have them. And what I do in the fall is I take those chopped up leaves and I put them on my ground. And I also have a friend who is a woodworker, and he saves me the sawdust. So I put them on the ground, and I have so much wind where I'm at that I have to cover them or they will blow away. There's just no saving them on the ground. So I saved great big pieces of cardboard. Sometimes we have it, but sometimes if I've gone to like a recycling center and somebody's got like a big piece of cardboard, I'll snatch it. Or I have tarp. And what I did last year was I put all the leaves down in the fall, and I put the tarps or the cardboard down, or I even had some old fencing from when we had our split rail fence. We redid it, so I had my husband save the old fencing. So I laid it down, and I put like bricks or pavers on it, and already I can tell you that it's done a wonder for my soil. I've had toads out there. I've had ladybugs crawling around already. The worms are they've multiplied. So I still have bags of chopped up leaves in my barn, So as the season goes on, when I start to pull those back, I'll either put them in, I'll compost them, or I'll put them on an area where I need mulch, like maybe around my perennials or something like that, and then I'll put mulch on top of it. But I guess I want to encourage everyone to save things like sheets, and even if it's old pieces of fabric or tarps or cardboard, because you can use those to cover for frost. You can use them to keep weeds out if you have to. If you're going to throw it away anyway, you can put them in between your rows and keep the weeds out. So I save that. And then the other thing I encourage people to save is save your plastic buckets. You can use those for planting. If you don't have pots, you can drill holes in them. But a lot of times when you drive around, people have container pots like they're throwing away, especially this time of year. They'll buy trees or they'll buy garden, big pots for perennials, and they'll put them out by the road. Well, a lot of them are really nice, and I had a ton, but people will come over, and I don't mind sharing any of my perennials. So at least I have pots, or if people say, oh, I have a whole bunch of plants, if you want them, I'll take my pots over and, with a shovel, and then I grab them from there. So save pots and trays. Like right now, a lot of us are starting seeds, or we having to bring the flats in and out. Well, you could save trays from whether it's a 13 by 9 pan or a Tupperware pan, or even like an old cookie sheet or a kitty litter, one of those little flat trays they put kitty litter in. And those are so handy because otherwise the water goes everywhere if you have to bring it in the house. So I save all that, and I have twine and string. And the other thing I would encourage too is my husband cuts conduit for me. He buys the big long things of conduit, and I use those for a lot of my stakes. Like if my pepper plants are starting to get really heavy, then I'll put a piece of conduit in, and then I use the shoelaces and I sort of tie them up to support them. Otherwise, if you get a strong wind, they'll just break right off. So, and then, they just get too top heavy. So I would encourage you to save or to get that. And if you get soaker hoses too, if you can, sometimes you find them real cheap. I probably have 8 or 10 of them right now. So I'm going to put that in an area where it's hard for me to water. And I have rain barrels too. So I can hook them up to the rain barrels and just let them go all through parts of my garden. So I wanted to get those in because a lot of people throw that stuff away. But I figured, well, with spring coming and if people can keep their eyes open, whether it's estate sales or garage sales. So anyway, Sharon and I will continue when we get back, and we'll pick up on the gardening. And we'd also like to mention what we do with some of our produce and how we dehydrate. So we'll be right back. Welcome back. This is hour number 2. This is Cathy, and I'm with Sharon, and we are teaching a class on gardening and food preservation and how we do it and our mistakes and our successes. Sorry, Sharon, I got a little long-winded there. I wanted to make one comment about tomatoes and ask you, do you rotate where you put your tomatoes every year?
Yeah, I actually do. We have a really large greenhouse, 40 feet long. It's 12 by 40, and it's one of those hoop ones because we can get frost at any time in summer up here at this elevation. Yeah, I move them from one side to the other just because I think it's healthier for them. I was going to bring up the idea of the leaves because I have collected those too. We have our county landfill. They have a lot where they put all the leaves that they gather through the summer. People can rake their leaves into the streets, and the county will come along and pick them up in some places. So they let them set all winter, and they'll compost. And if you call them and get there early enough, you can drive to their lot, and they'll actually load your pickup with composted leaves. And sometimes there's some trash if you have to pull it out because it just, got picked up. But we use that to help our gardens at first, our beds. And I was going to say mulch is really helpful for conserving water. Like you said, like your tomatoes need water, we totally do. need that. My husband's really good at watering our garden. It's not my favorite thing to do. So he does that, and I tend to do the weeding and more weeding and planting. We work together, but I tend to do more of the planting and weeding, and he does more of the watering, which is a good trade for me. But I would suggest that if you can, you get some good hoses. Sometimes you can find some pretty decent ones at people who are moving or elderly people, but personally, last year I just went to Costco and we finally decided just to invest in some good hoses. They have some constructor type, they're heavy duty hoses. And I spoke to one of the members there, and he said he'd had his for 5 years, and they were wonderful. So I picked up more, and I bought another row today because you really do want to be able to water your plants, and it's a real hassle if you don't have good hoses or ones that are leaking. And there are repair kits, but I would suggest that if you can get the money, just buy some good heavy-duty hoses, and I would think that Costco would be your better place to buy them for the price. And if you mulch your plants, which we've done before, this little story, Ms. Truth, one thing that I sometimes get a tad opinionated. But anyway, we had a garden way back, and my husband had read about mulching, and I grew up in Oregon. Nobody ever mulches anything, okay? And I just thought that, oh, yeah, right, so much. So we took about half our beds, and he mulched half of the raised beds we had and left the others. And I could not believe how abundant the crop was in the stuff that we mulched. So I became a believer in mulching, okay? We do not mulch everything, but we do mulch a lot. And so if you can, I would suggest you do that. And the other thing about cardboard is wonderful. They have a book called Lasagna Gardening. You start out with heavy cardboard, and you layer all this stuff, and you grow a little bit of dirt on top, and it'll grow, and it'll take hard pan dirt and make it really soft over time. But if you think you want to garden more, say for next year, you could put heavy cardboard down and just weight it down with something. And over the summer, it will, it'll break down the soil underneath. It'll make it really moist, and it'll kill weeds off. And yet the water will still get through the cardboard. You would want to at least layer 2 or 3 layers, or at least like we have a furniture store, and you can get the boxes from them, and we break them down, and we can use that for the ground. So if you were thinking you would want to expand your garden next year, that's a really good way to soften the soil and make it more workable and kill the weeds. So also, you were talking about saving all this stuff, and it's funny because we save a whole lot of stuff too. But coffee grounds are incredibly good for a garden, and the worms really like them. So if you make your own coffee and grind it and stuff, keeping the coffee grounds is just a really good idea also.
Yeah, all those ideas are wonderful, Sharon. The leaves are just amazing for the ground. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you think about going into like a wood, if you go in there and you would lift up the leaves or anything around the base of the trees, that dirt almost always is just beautiful because it's years and years of composted matter and leaves. And to me, I mean, yeah, you can buy like the hardwood mulch, but I don't think there's any comparison to getting composted leaves, and it enriches your soil. So
I agree.
That's just, yeah. One of the things I wanted to bring up was right now in most climates, Amazon 5, you can put in your seeds if you haven't done it yet. And a lot of the easy seeds to grow are peas, lettuce, beets, carrots, cucumbers, corn, and radishes. So those are easy. They germinate well. And one of the things that I learned, actually from my brother, my husband had some thin boards, and they were only, I think it was particle board, maybe ½ inch thick, and he had some narrow pieces left, and I asked him to save those for me. So what I do is I put my seeds in, and I water them very lightly, and then I put the board on top. Just set it on top, no weight or anything, and then I check it every few days, and as soon as you see them start to sprout, then I pull those boards off. And that has helped me quite a bit from the rain. I've had rain wash them out. When we get like a really bad thunderstorm, I'll put seeds in, and then it washes everything away. So if you have long thin boards, I save those too in my barn. And then when I seed, I put those in there. And now the other thing that you can do, like if you have carpeting, some people cut strips like old carpeting and they put that in between their rows so they can walk. Now it's not going to break down like leaves, but if that's your only option, it's something that helps to keep the weeds out. If you have like a long row, you could just roll it out there and throw it out at the end of the year. So that's something I wanted to get in there too, with putting the seeds in right now. And especially with your lettuce and your peas, you can plant them like this week, plant it like a row, and then maybe wait a week or 10 days and then plant some more so that you kind of have succession planting. So they'll last, but then once it gets too hot, they won't survive probably past July. But last year what I did was I let some of them go to seed, and then I saved the seeds, and actually I've got about a dozen plants that reseeded themselves out there. I'm already picking leaves off of them.
I used to plant my spinach all in one area, and it would reseed every year. I would plant some more, but it would reseed in clumps, so you'd have like 5 little spinach plants coming up. So once I got about, an inch, probably 2 inches, inch and a half, 2 inches tall, I would just respread them out around, so I kind of saved seeds that way. But it also acclimates to your environment really well then, if you can keep using your own seeds, and it grows better. So I do that. I have done that with the spinach, and there's a book on seed saving. Actually, one year I used carrots. You have to winter them over, then you replant them, and they'll seed that year. And it actually worked really well. Unfortunately, it wasn't really the type of carrot I ideally cared to do. So I'm trying different kinds to figure out what I like best. And when I do, then I'm going to try to winter that carrot over and create my own carrot seeds. So, let them do it. But it's kind of fun to play around with if you can get your own seeds and replant them. It really is. But I would suggest first that you just try to start growing stuff. I really believe that having a good garden will be extremely helpful down the road. During the Depression, lots of people had their little gardens. During the war, they had the victory gardens. Throughout history, people have usually had gardens that had any land. And we've gotten away from that with this just-in-time delivery, and we can get stuff from South America anytime we want. But I do believe with what I see, well, we already seen inflation, and there's a lot of predictions that it's going to be much worse, that having a garden could really offset your budget. Plus, it would create a lot better nutrition and healthier food for you than the stuff that's been shipped for 3 weeks or 2 weeks, kept in those special storage things. They're going to lose some of the nutrition the longer you store it. So, plus, I enjoy it. I love watching little plants come up. And I like I said, probably my most favorite thing is just growing the tomatoes, because there's just something really satisfying seeing those nice big red tomatoes hanging from the vines. So I feel that people have kind of lost the joy of gardening because they haven't maybe even experienced it. And I do think there's a lot of joy. And yes, there's work, but honestly, if you'll mulch it, you won't have near the weeds that you think you would. And you can even just mulch your cardboard, honestly. You can just put pieces of cardboard around your plant, and that'll keep it down. But leaves are better because the leaves do amazing. I put them around my shrubs, and they just took off, So if you can round them up, it's really good. And this fall, if you can be more proactive and grab bags of that stuff, it's great compost.
Yeah, I'm sure people thought that I was a lunatic going and taking their leaves, because they would look out there. Some people looked out their windows. I kind of waved like, it's okay, I'm just taking your leaves. But they were chopped up so fine, and they were like, they're just beautiful. And it's like I said, you'll just notice the worms and the ladybugs. And the other thing I wanted to encourage people to do is like Sharon was talking about tomatoes. Every couple days, just go out and look at your plants. See if there's a bug on them. You're going to get probably tomato hornworms a lot of times. And I know there's different things that you can do to prevent them, but if you can get them when they're real little, they won't clean your whole plant off. If you wait 2 or 3 days and you get a bunch of tomato hornworms, you're not going to have much left to that plant. They're going to eat all the fruit and all the tips. And the plant normally survives. But I would recommend going out and checking and seeing if things are dry, if you have any bugs. or just getting the weeds before they get too out of control. So, Sharon, talk to me about what you said about the carrots. Now, you said, do you plant them and then leave them there, and then in the spring they get seeds? Is that what you meant by getting the seeds the next year?
Well, for us, it gets too cold. It'll kill them. So I took some and just wintered them over in my basement under some sand. I just rounded up some sand, and it was a little damp. And then the next year I replanted that, and then it makes seeds the second year on carrots. And I believe that cabbage is a lot like that, too. I haven't done that one. Yeah, you just kind of have to look up. You can get a couple books that are really good about it, or you can just look it up online. I mean, good grief, nowadays with the internet, you can find anything, and it's, right at your fingertips, literally. I also grow, like you said, the radishes. I was going to say the other thing I like to grow a lot is green beans. And to me, they're very easy to grow. Green beans are. And I personally have canned them, and then I've frozen some, and you can actually dry them if you want to store them for longer. But drying is going to give you a different texture, so I would probably lean towards freezing or canning them. And I hear the music again. So
yeah, and we'll pick up on the other side of the break. I wanted to pick up on a couple things Sharon and I were talking about. I wanted to mention this other couple things, too, about trying to help you plant. I take a dowel, like a wooden dowel. It's probably about, half an inch or a third of an inch diameter, and I mark it. I start out with a marker, and I start 1 inch, 2 inch, 3 inch, all the way up to 8 inches. That way, it's right in my garden bucket, and if I have to plant something that's 2 inches, I can just push it right down in the soil, and it's real nice for like planting peas and things like that, because it's about the right circle that you want around, and it's just a nice thing. It just makes it easier than you guessing how deep everything is. So I do have that in my little garden thing. My other comment I wanted to say is, like, herbs are a lot of times expensive. There's some that come back year after year, like thyme, and if you have it in the right climate, rosemary can come back. But I have a garden center that I go to, and you might want to call around and find out, but I can get a whole flat of herbs for $10.50, and that's 48 plants, and I can mix and match whether I'm doing vegetables or herbs. So I went and got probably 3/4 of a flat of herbs, and that was cheaper than me trying to start at some of the seeds for me. I just haven't had luck with starting some herbs. So I would call around, because I've seen them anywhere from, I think the cheapest I've seen them is $4 for a pot, all the way up to $8. And for me, it just was a no-brainer just to go by. I know right where to go where I'm at. So check around. If you can start them with seeds, that's great. But, that's something that Sharon and I both, we dry our herbs. You can do them, like she said, put them on a screen and put them in a warm window. I use my dehydrator quite a bit. Some of them, like oregano, I'll put them in a paper bag and put them in the sun, and they dry in a day or two. So, okay, Sharon, I wanted to get back with you and ask you about beans and what you do with your green beans, like what successes, how do you get good green beans?
I don't know. They just grow well for me. I can't tell you. I just put them in the ground. We water. If I think of it, we get mulch on them. I tend to plant them close enough that they stay pretty dense. You don't want too close, but we just have really good success. If you didn't care, I was going to jump to broccoli and cauliflower and stuff like that. And I was going to say that I tend to grow some onions right around my broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, those type of things. And and cabbage, it does tend to deter bugs. It does not keep them completely from getting wormy, but it definitely makes a big dent in it. I have found that that's real helpful for me. And if you can mulch around those plants, they do much better, because they need a lot of water, and they just do a better job. We grow a lot of broccoli because we both like it, and I grow some cauliflower because I like it, and we grow cabbage, and we attempt to make sauerkraut, and I must say that's not something we've been terribly successful at, but we keep trying. We get a little limited success sometimes. I guess there's just a learning curve that I have not quite conquered yet. I did take some cabbage, though, and just dry it so I could throw it into some various hearty soups and stews like that. Not too much unless you love the taste of cabbage, but it does add some nutrition, and it stores quite well to do that. And then broccoli, I usually just freeze, but I have dried some. But what I thought I was going to mention to you, because I didn't know this until last year, so it shows what I don't know yet, you can eat the leaves on those plants, like broccoli leaves and cabbage leaves and all those. You can cut them and you can put them in strips and put them in stir fry, and they're really quite edible. Or you can dehydrate them, turn them into a powder. Like if you liked broccoli soup, you could add more of the flavor by just using the powdered broccoli as well as maybe some little piece of frozen broccoli. So it saves space, but it also creates nutrition. And we grow because we enjoy, but we're also, like I said, with things coming like that, we're kind of pushing what is more nutritious and what would be helpful. So that's another thing just kind of interesting to know. We also have chickens, and so whatever I don't use, I can just thin the great big broccoli leaves sometimes down a little bit, so I'll spend more time on putting its energy into the fruit, and then I throw those out to the chickens and ducks that we have. But I thought it might be interesting because I didn't know they were even edible till last year.
That's great information. I got a couple comments on the broccoli and the cabbage when we get back, Sharon.
Mm-hmm.
This is Cathy with Sharon. I wanted to mention a couple things. I wanted to mention, don't forget to ask your neighbors and your friends, either for advice or if they have perennials. I recently had a friend that was from Tennessee, and I gave him a whole bunch of my walking onions. They kind of look like a green onion, and they come back every year. I don't know the technical name. All I know is they were given to me, and they were called walking onions. And what they are is they come back and they start out real small, and it's best to pick them when they're about the size of a green onion, maybe a little bit bigger, maybe double the size. But then you let them go. You leave a small patch of them, let them go, and they'll get little seeds on the top, like little bulbets on the top. And then I've been so bad lately, some years, where it gets really cold and I can't get out there. I just cut them off and let them fall on the ground, and they'll just re-root right there. And I have probably about a 3-foot patch out there right now that I need to thin out. So that's something that you can do, is don't be afraid to ask your neighbors. One of the things I wanted to mention, too, if you can if you have them, or you look at garage sales or along the side of the road, your peas and cucumbers all need to climb. So I have a couple trellises outside that I use for some of them. I also have a split rail fence, and I let my peas grow up on those, and I tie them up just to hold them until they get established. But you can also they make little spiral things, too, that you put in the ground, and then the peas can grow up there. So there's another thing. People use them for flowers, climbing flowers. I'm not sure of the pronunciation. I believe it's called an obelisk, but it kind of has kind of looks like an upside-down tomato cage. And you can let things grow up there. I have a couple of those in my barn. So I make use of all the things that you have. And I guess why I'm saying this is just so you save money. You don't have to go out and buy all this stuff. If you just kind of keep your eyes open and look. But Sharon, you were talking about broccoli. Well, someday if I don't show up, my neighbors probably call the funny farm, because I keep a fly swatter out there. And when I'm out there and those cabbage moths are out there, you can never catch them. So I try to whack them with the fly swatter.
You know what? I was going to say, last year, I remember something else I did last year. I had no worms last year. Now, this could be coincidence because weather changes, but I also planted the flower alyssum around it. I put some plants around, and I had heard it deters those cabbage moths and stuff like that. So you can get a little 6-pack usually at the, the little garden places, and they're not very expensive. So I just tried them out. So I think that also helps too. I was thinking of something else. I don't know why I thought about with broccoli and onions, but I was thinking about growing your squash, pumpkins, and like watermelons and stuff. And I grew some watermelons and little cantaloupes just to see if I could do it in my greenhouse. But, they take off like crazy. So I just pinched them back and didn't let them grow as long. And they tended to put side sprouts out and little, side shoots. And so we got a few, and I just wanted to see if I could grow them or not. And so that is something you don't have to be too worried about pinching some of those things back if you don't want them to take off, because they'll grow like 10 feet long if you let them. So if you're just trying to condense them, just pinch off the ends and they'll put out little side shoots. So just a thought.
That's a great idea. Sharon, I wanted to mention you were talking about broccoli, and one of the things that we were talking about with the worms is they annihilated my kale last year. It was doing really well, and then all of a sudden, I don't know what happened, but I went out one day and it was just stripped. I mean, there were quite a few of the little worms, so they must have gotten in there when I didn't see them. They get under the leaves, and if you don't look quickly, or they're in the crooks, and you can't see them little until they get bigger. But you were talking about broccoli, and I like to do sprouting. Now, that's the inside thing, but it just goes to show I have 2 jars, and then I have one that has 3 trays. And you can get online. It's very easy. The secret is to rinse the seed and drain them. Rinse them and drain them in about 3 or 4 or 5 days. You'll have sprouts. But I recently got a 2.5 pound of organic broccoli sprouts for $40. Now that sounds like a lot, but that'll make a ton of broccoli sprouts. And the nutrients in a broccoli sprout, especially from like buying something in the store, it's like 100 times more. It's just so much more nutrient dense. So I like to grow sprouts right now, especially because everything is so expensive in the store. It doesn't taste that good. So I've been growing like clover and mung beans and broccoli sprouts and alfalfa sprouts. You can put them on salads and you can put them on sandwiches, and I just snack on them sometimes. They're really good if you like that flavor. It's a great way to get nutrients, and you're getting something really good for you. But that was a really good price, the price that I got, because I think it was like $25 off, which I've never seen it that cheap. So I thought, okay, I'm just gonna get these. So that I wanted to mention that because I was taking notes when you were talking. But I'll try the alyssum around those broccoli and the kale plant.
Yeah, I didn't have worms last year. I have gotten them occasionally. I haven't had them hit the kale, but that's something to consider. I bought a bunch of broccoli sprouting seeds through Azure Co-op, and they were $14.41 for a pound, organic. But I like them. I also like, it's kind of a matter of what you like, but I take the mung beans, the sprouting mung, M-U-N-G beans, and I think they taste delicious. They remind me of fresh peas, and I've sprouted them in the past. And there's some pretty cute little sprouting systems, but I've just taken jars, wide mouth jars, and put a netting across it, a real thin netting, so it breathes a little, rinsed them, and started them that way. And I used to sprout a whole lot of stuff. So I actually used to sprout a whole bunch of wheat for my chickens, too, in the winter to give them more nutrition.
Oh, yeah.
But sprouting is too. Yeah, well, sprouting is a great idea this is exactly gardening, but it can continue all winter. And, as prices get higher and higher, it might get really cost prohibitive to buy salad makings in the winter. It really could be. And so that's one of the reasons I bought these right now, because I'm trying to be proactive for what I see coming. And if not, I'll eat them anyway. But I think that what we've been talking about, inflation coming, is starting to become very visible if you start paying attention to what's out there. And everything I'm hearing is that it's going to get a lot worse. But even if it didn't get a lot worse, it's already gotten worse. And things just pretty much never go down in price. They just keep going up. And once they hit that level, they don't drop back down, hardly ever. And you and I would know that from years of following budgets and stuff like that and prices. So I feel that, it's a good idea to take advantage of what you can. And I would encourage getting a bunch of sprouting seeds too and start, playing around with it, see how it works for you. And then, like I said, we both see the huge benefits of garden. Even if you just threw some lettuces and some greens like that in, and let them pop up. You could do it in container gardens, lettuce and a lot of those little greens. They don't require real deep roots. So you had about a 6-8 inch deep pot. You probably could grow them, especially lettuces. You can. Kale has a little bit longer of a root, but say 8 inches, you probably can get by with that even. So you could even just do small little plots and try it, and then at least you'd have fresh lettuce, and, you could start reaping the benefits of growing your own food. And it is a little bit of work, but especially if you put mulch around it, it really cuts back the weeding time. And they do have to be watered. And if you just do a regular garden, you could probably run one of those rotating water sprinklers on. Because of our raised beds, at this point, it's more productive for us to hand water, and it's mostly my husband does it, and he's willing to stand out there and do it. So that's very nice. But it doesn't have to take hours to do this. It just takes a little bit of your time. And most people that I know are not productive in the evening. They sit around and watch TV, okay, or go on the computer. And so you say take out a half hour of that time, if even that, and you work in your garden a little bit. You get fresh air, you get sunshine, and you end up with better food to eat. And then you will feel, I think it gives you a self-confidence knowing that, hey, I can feed my family even if I can't go to the store. So that's just my way of thinking. I don't know how you feel about it.
Oh, I think it's therapeutic too. It's work. Yeah. You're not going to have nice nails and all that, but it's so rewarding to grow your garden, to grow food that you've eaten. And what I like to do is I like to pass it down. I'm showing my grandchildren when they come over. This is a tomato, and these are where raspberries come from. An onion is in the ground, and we'll pull it out, and you can see what it looks like, and these are the roots. And I think I've kind of instilled that. They enjoy coming over, and they have their little garden gloves, and so I give them a little area where they can dig. So I like it for that too. It's just, and it's healthier. I don't know. Maybe some people don't want to do it, but I'm going to do it as long as I can till I can't get my hands on the dirt anymore. But Sharon, you were talking about lettuce. Now, I sometimes use, they're like long and rectangular. They look like window boxes. Those are really nice for starting lettuce in them. And I kept it right by the back door. And, one year I didn't have my garden ready when we first moved in, and I had 3 or 4 of them, and I had lettuce in one and spinach in another. And actually, they did really well in those. So if you don't have a plot for that, you can use those little they look like window boxes. They're probably about 4 or 5 inches wide, and they're probably about 20 inches long. And people put them on their porch and stuff. But you could put lettuce in there, and who cares whether it's lettuce or it's a flower?
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of things. You can use almost any kind of container as long as it has some drainage, but that would look really attractive. Those would be really nice. Yeah, a lot of it's the attitude that I talk about because this is the way I live my life. It's not, I can't, but how can I? Okay. What could I do? What could I use? And the internet with YouTubes and stuff, goodness sake, the YouTube channels, it's a vast wealth of information. I mean, just so many ideas. And, you just spend a little time on that and you can figure out all kinds of ways. Like you and I like to reuse things like the window boxes or, various containers. Like we have ducks. And so I have a wading pool for them. Well, after having this wading pool about 3 years, it's developed cracks and holes in it. And so I'm going to be turning it into a bed in my garden, and I'm going to put strawberries. I'm going to put my little strawberry runners in there and try to grow strawberries in it because, it's a automatic raised bed. So
yeah.
I'm planning. My strawberries are just starting to pop up, the little leaves and stuff. So I'm going to, thin them out and put them in there as my plan. But there are all kinds of ways to do stuff, and it is rewarding, I think, to see cool little plants come up And then you do have to realize that there will be some failures, okay? And some years are better. We've always grown broccoli like crazy, never had a trouble, and then last year was a little challenging. So it's just the way it is.
Yeah, and you learn. Every year you learn. We'll be right back. Well, welcome back. Sharon, I wanted to ask you, we didn't really get into it that much, but I wanted your thoughts on dehydrating. Just to kind of give me your, what do you dehydrate, how do you do it, and maybe kind of teach people the benefits of it?
Yeah, that is a huge topic, isn't it? I will say that, I'll tell you, but I was going to just say what you said before. I would suggest people grow when you're back in the garden. Grow what you like. Like, I have not found a way I like turnips. I do not grow turnips, okay? They grow well, but why grow them if I don't like them? So, I dehydrate all kinds of stuff. I like to, I dehydrate my peppers a lot of times because they're easy to throw into foods. And I have dehydrated some corn because you can throw that. I also, last year, we grew some corn that was supposed to be for my corn meal. I found that it wasn't that terribly flavorful, and so I would probably use it for corn tortillas or something like that you wouldn't need a real cornish taste. I don't know. I'm going to try a different kind this year. You can dry your peas. I usually don't. I freeze them. I like fresh peas. I dry a lot of things like the kale and squash and chard because I add it into foods. I dry lots of onions, and I have dried my garlic. Last year I canned garlic by putting it in white vinegar, and that I peeled it and put it in there, and that actually was pretty successful because fresh garlic, to me, to have to get the garlic press out and clean it all up is kind of tedious. And so I'm trying to figure out ways to keep it fresher and yet easy to put into my food so it doesn't require a lot of work. But I have just dried it and powdered it, which is pretty handy. I use my dehydrator for a lot of that, but for the greens and that kind of thing, I used to grow herbs too. So oregano, I would just lay these stems on those greens and let them dry, and then you just strip the leaves, just strip them down to get the leaves off of that. And I did that with a lot of the branchy type things. I dehydrated even raspberry leaves for tea, and I do the same thing. Mm-hmm. The thing about drying is it will last forever, especially if you put it in jars and use a vacuum packer. But I actually just put it in jars before with the lid on it and kept it in a cooler place, and it was good for years, literally years. So I'm leaning towards dehydrating things that I think that I could use more often because it doesn't take up so much space and it stores for so long. And then it leaves me more room for the things I like to can, like I like to do salsa and things like that. But it is a really good way to store it. Indians used to do it. I mean, people have done this throughout years. If you don't have canning jars and canning lids that have been difficult to come by, you can dehydrate all kinds of stuff, and they really reconstitute quite well. Do you have any things that you normally dry yourself?
Yeah, apples. I slice apples real thin on my food processor. Tomatoes, I do Romas or meaty ones normally, or I do the little, I've kind of explained it before, but I do the cherry tomatoes where I cut them in half and I sprinkle a little olive oil and salt on them and I sun dry them. I do a lot of my herbs, zucchini, celery. You were talking about raspberry leaves, which I do, but mint, I do my mint too. Boy, does that taste good. And the lemon verbena, you can make a nice tea. It's a real nice soothing tea. I even do liver for my dog. I put it on a piece of parchment paper. It dries and then I break it up in little small pieces for treats, or you can do chicken, but you got to watch the meat. It's got to be thin. I don't do any big old chunks of meat on there. I'd be afraid it'd get moldy, but the liver's real thin and it's a good treat for her. But all the herbs too, I'm like you, I do marjoram and basil and oregano, all the mints and the lavender and the rosemary, those, and I just take them. I have a little Ninja cup that fits on a food process, or it's a blender, and I fill it about half the way through and pulse it a few times, and boy, that does a beautiful job of just getting the herbs just right. It's just, I just have one of them little it's like you'd use it for a smoothie, one of those kind of cups that's right on there, and I just pulse it. And then I either put them in food saver bags, or I freeze them, or I put them in like canning jars. But they keep a long time. I think when you do them yourself, for some reason, they just seem like they keep a lot longer than when you buy them in the store.
I agree. Yeah, I've done a lot of herbs in the past. In fact, I started some this year to start and get back into doing more of that, because the fresh herbs that even you just dehydrate them, they just have a more powerful flavor. I mean, it's just much nicer. It really is. Yeah, I dehydrate a lot. I make turkey in my dehydrator too, which is fun. But, yeah, there's just so many things to do. We could talk for hours, though, because we do a lot of stuff.
Yeah, but, Sharon and I, we think a lot alike. And Sharon, I appreciate all your advice and your help. And I've learned a few things from you today, so I appreciate that.
Well, I appreciate yours. I like the idea of using the dowel, so I have to try that next.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.